So as a disclaimer, this is meant to go in order, this entire playlist. So if you're watching it from this point on, you should probably go backwards to the beginning video. And also, you need to know chromatic harmony in key, and I will actually link that in the description and right here. Because if you don't understand basic chromatic harmony, you're not going to understand continuous chromatic modulation or just chromatic modulation in general. It's not going to make any sense to you. And I like to be honest on my channel. I don't like to tell people they're instantly going to master harmony by doing such and such trick. No, that's not the case. You have to really work at it, especially when it comes to chromatic modulation. And the way to get there is to learn chromatic harmony in key. So with the late Romantic period, we're not always dealing with these highly chromatic, fancy sounding kind of parts like this. So there's times of higher complexity, and then there's also times of lesser complexity, temporary keys, producing something. Well, let me just do what we're going to deal with. We're going to deal with the half diminished or the diminished and its resolution. Well, one of the resolutions which produces chromaticism. So let's go over something here. We're not dealing with any key signature here. If we just take the diminished chord, not a fully diminished seventh like we've been dealing with, but a diminished or a half diminished, this can resolve nicely to a major chord down a fifth, regardless of what key you're in. The half diminished, same thing. You notice how that works out really nice? That's either down a fifth or up a fourth. So remember this, a diminished chord or a half diminished can always resolve to a chord up a fourth or down a fifth, a major chord, or even a dominant chord, which we'll deal with another time. So we're going to deal with F major and move rapidly from F major to B major. So temporarily being in F, I hit the diminished chord, I know I could resolve it up to a major chord, a fourth up or a fifth down, producing chromaticism. Where does this come from? It's actually a good way to modulate to the relative minor. And that's the more typical use of it, but we're not going to do that. We're going to go to D major and treat that as our new one tonal center and repeat the same process. So this resolution produces that chromatic note in F. Now we get to D, we're going to repeat the same process. Which takes us to B. This produces another way to rapidly modulate, but you're temporarily staying in keys. So I just kind of improvised on this to show that timing is going to be a key aspect in these kind of things. So you might want to take various inversion routes. Which produce really nice, lovely effects like that. Giving you kind of a walk down. I'll play it really slow so you can... Which gives us the G minor seventh instead. And the half diminished seventh. Suspension on the A chord, resolve. Suspension on D, resolve. Just a plain passing tone on G. E minor seventh, with the lowest note is the minor seventh, go into the half diminished chord in D. Suspending on the F sharp dominant and then resolving to B. So we took an alternate route, and remember I said you could resolve the half diminished to a dominant chord. So we just produced an alternate route with different chords and suspensions and passing tones and stuff. So here's another trick. It usually resolves to a major chord down a fifth or up a fourth, but you can also resolve to a 6/4 chord, which would be D with the A as the lowest note, which is a 6/4 chord, which we talked about in a previous episode. So if you skipped any of these, you're not going to know what that. And in previous episodes, we explained why the 6/4 is a great chord to land on, because it itself wants to go somewhere. So you hear that? And you could approach it from different inversions like that. But you hear that 6/4 chord wants to go somewhere. So that's why we're using it. Now I get to the 6/4 chord, I'm going to actually not stay in D for very long. I'm going to go back into chromatic harmony. Just starting here. Now there's 6/4 chord. So this resolution to the 6/4 chord, I consider a kind of like a deceptive resolution to that diminished or half diminished chord when you go to the 6/4 chord instead. But it works because you're still landing on that same note that would be up a fourth or down a fifth. Now that's all I'm going to talk about in this video is just that resolution of that diminished or half diminished chord. Because as I mentioned in previous videos, learn one move at a time, one trick at a time. And I would say adopt that theory with music in general. Learn one small chunk at a time of music concepts. Trying to master too many things at once is actually going to leave a huge hole in your ability to remember. And trust me, I tried to do that once in my life and I realized that path does not work. You have to do this slowly and gradually build your harmonic vocabulary.